Hello everyone! So around the Ides of March I was casually looking for music on YouTube to play while I did homework and tried to run our school spring musical using only Google Drive and prayers, when I remembered I have not yet come up with an idea for a YouTube video for March. Indeed, it is a busy time of year for us students. That means all 15 of you subscribers should feel honored that I chose to add you to my already full plate. This overwhelming amount of work was the inspiration for today's video. 12 books I had to read and for the most part annotate for school. I still firmly believe that the easiest way to take the fun out of reading is to require it, set a deadline, overanalyze, and raise the stakes for comprehension by putting tests and quizzes over every single event of the book. It adds way too much stress. Quite possibly the first required reading book I ever had to read for a grade was this one, Pictures of Hollis Woods. It's funny, I remember liking this book when I read it in 6th grade, but I didn't actually remember it existed until I found it on my bookshelf, and I had to skim through it again to remember the plotline. This book revolves around a girl named Hollis Woods, who's a foster child and has been to many families, but still she has not yet been adopted because she keeps, running away from them. But she keeps coming back to this one old lady named Josie, who is kind of losing her memory. Like I said, I remember liking it, but I'd have to reread it now to give it an honest opinion. I still think that summary sounds interesting. Also in 6th grade was The Boy Who Dared. All I remembered about this book before skimming through it was that it was about a prisoner on death row. Anyone can really see that by looking at the cover. This and pictures are both relatively short, both about 150 pages, so I'll definitely have to revisit them. The summer between 6th and 7th grade, we got a list of 4 or 5 books where we had to pick one of them to read over the summer before the first day of school. And I picked When Zachary Beaver Came to Town. This book. I actually never did finish this one. I think part of my problem, part of why I didn't like it enough to read it all the way through, was that I put it off too long. I don't usually procrastinate, but my summer reading strategy has always been that I read whatever other books I want to during the summer and have my summer reading book be the most recent one I read by the time the school year starts. Now, I don't remember if it was just that I forgot I had a book to read or what, but by the time I picked it up, I had about a week to read it, and when it wasn't a super exciting book. What I remember about this book is that it was about a boy named Toby and his family. He had a brother in the war, and during this one summer where this whole story takes place, the fattest kid in the whole world comes to town. Zachary Beaver, that's his name, that's the title. Basically, this kid goes around the country to show off how fat he is, and he's essentially a tourist attraction, and Toby goes to see him, and I'm pretty sure they become friends. I can't remember specifically what happens with them to start off the plot, 'cause I'm not even sure I got that far. I think the best part of my experience with this book, though, is how much my mom tried to feign interest in this book, hoping it would be contagious or something, and I'd enjoy the book more. I ended up picking a different one off the list and reading it in 3 days. In 7th grade, we read Tangerine. This is the one where I realized that required reading could also be enjoyable reading, because books still have literary aspects to them that make them enjoyable. The plot of Tangerine is about a kid named Paul who has these enormous glasses that he calls Coke bottle glasses, and they kind of drive the plot considering that he got them when he looked at an eclipse too long and essentially blinded himself. He has a whole independent learning program at school because he just can't function in a classroom setting, and he doesn't have a great relationship with his brother or really with his family. Well, his mom, he kind of does. I just remember getting to this part in the book where things are getting climactic, breakthroughs are happening, and I distinctly remember thinking, whoa, this is a good book. And it's required. What? Annotations got pretty intense too. We had to use those symbols, like X's, question marks, smiley faces, whatever. They just got bigger. As the more excited I got, the bigger the annotations were. Later on that year we read The Giver, and quality read in my opinion. This book is about a boy named Jonas who lives in this utopia where at the age of 12 everyone is assigned a job in the community, and the government sort of watches you throughout your life to see what you're interested in and what you're good at so that they can give you a decent job in the community. And it's almost like a communism sort of thing where, you know, everyone gets their meals on their doorstep every day, and everyone... I'm not really sure that there is like a monetary unit. I'd have to reread it to remember. I'm going to put a spoiler warning on this part of the video, so if you haven't read it, go forth into the world and do so. You can just mute your screen, and when you see this switch to my other hand, you can unmute it. The world building in this one was fantastic. A kid in our class, I remember, actually spoiled us for the whole black and white vision thing by saying something along the lines of, hasn't anyone noticed that the only colors ever described is just shades of gray? And I don't know if he predicted that or if he knew and was just being obnoxious, but I do think I would have appreciated that plot twist a lot more had I not known about it. I cannot fathom how they try to make that a plot twist in a movie adaptation where you can physically see the color or lack thereof. In the book, Lois Lowry plays with the fact that you have to use your mind's eye to read the book, and visualization is what makes that so huge. She knows that all of her readers are imagining it wrong the entire time until you find out that there is no color in this world. And it's not the frustrating kind of you've been imagining it wrong initially, where you're imagining a brunette the whole time until like the third book in the series where they say, his sandy blonde hair. Like, this one was deliberate. I always love learning about characters. There it is. I say it in every video. I love characters. But it's interesting to see how everyone gets their jobs based on kind of who they are. It almost divides them into, like, the caring people and the smart people and the whatever else. Kinds of just qualities and characteristics are put into different jobs. And it's interesting to see how it's decided, which makes every character you meet a little bit different because they all have different jobs. The concept of the story, too, was just beyond creative. The society she created was so organized and so well thought out that I hated how quickly it ended, and it does end very quickly. I'll hold this up far enough away that you don't see what I wrote specifically, but this is my annotations for the end. All questions. Most of them are like, what happened to this character, and does this character ever find out about this, and what about this other thing? Because there aren't a lot of answers. I remember learning that there was a sequel and being like, thank God, you can't end a story all poetic and expect me to accept that the story was just about this section of this character's life. However, the second book, which I bought shortly after finishing The Giver, is about a completely different set of characters, just set in, like, the same dystopia. I've heard that there are 4 books in the series, and that eventually they all tie together at the end, but I kind of lost interest once I knew that I wasn't going to directly learn what happened to all the characters we left behind. Between 7th and 8th grade, I picked Life as We Knew It as my summer reading book, and similar to The Giver, I loved the concept, I loved the idea, but I hated the ending. This book is about when a meteor hits the moon and knocks it closer to the Earth, causing a lot of natural disasters to happen, because, you know, the moon controls, like, waves and things. There's tidal waves, there's earthquakes, there's volcano eruptions, all sorts of horrible things, and how Miranda and her family deals with that. Spoilers coming, mute the screen, because I have nothing to talk about with this ending. What I despise is that the author gave up, just gave up at the end. These characters are out of food, everyone is doomed to die, and then, hooray, we found a bag of food. Are you joking? Are you actually joking? What happens when the food runs out? The fact is the problem isn't solved. All these natural disasters are still happening, you're still going to die eventually, but all this little temporary relief is going to just solve everything? No. No. Like, I understand that you want to have a happy ending for your characters, but that doesn't always have to happen. Why does everyone think that for the book to be able to end, that you have to have happy characters? I mean, this is a good book! Everyone dies! My point is that you can't just give up at the end. Like, this author literally just looked at her story and said, alright, this is getting a little bit long, I think I'm just gonna wrap everything up. Wow, I screwed up these characters. Wow. Ooh, I'm not sure I can fix this. I'll just give them food. They'll be fine. No! No! I remember in an outrage after finishing this book, I started writing an alternate ending where I started like chapter 11 or something, and I killed off the mom, and I made all the electricity in the town shut off so that the government could use all the energy to start building like a rocket to try to like push the moon back into place or something ridiculous. I don't even know, but I can tell you whatever I wrote as a 12-year-old is so much better than this ending. It's just not realistic, it doesn't solve anything. Oh my gosh. I kind of wonder what happened to my alternate ending. Like, I don't know where that ended up. It'd be interesting to see how far I actually got on that. I know I didn't finish it, but neither did this author, so... Oh, doesn't matter apparently. Then, during 8th grade, we read only one book, Night. This book is a memoir of Elie Wiesel's life. I don't really know how to pronounce his name, but I'm going to call him Elie Wiesel because I think that's right, but sorry if that's wrong. Anyway, Elie Wiesel was part of the Holocaust. He was a victim who had to go to all these like internment camps, all these death camps, and he just wrote about what he remembers seeing, how he remembers feeling about it. Our only assignment was writing an essay on it, and we rehearsed writing one of 4 prompts so often that it wasn't as much an essay as it was a how quickly can you write what you've already memorized writing by accident kind of thing. Stop using finger quotes, Cassidy. Somewhere between 8th grade and freshman year we had to read And Then There Were None. It was so good! This book is about these 10 people who get an invitation to basically travel to this island in the middle of nowhere for like a meeting. The thing is, when they all get there, all 10 of them are kind of looking at each other like, well, who invited us? Like, where is this person who invited us all? Suddenly this record goes off in the background that accuses every single one of them of murder, and then people start getting murdered. Ooh. I remember seeing that this was our required reading a book and kind of going, oh, Agatha Christie, sounds kind of boring. Some old dead author who wrote like 5 billion books in her lifetime. Ooh. But I thoroughly enjoyed this. It's a creative concept for a book, because it's really hard to write a realistic murder mystery without making the number of deaths ridiculous, and also not extremely obvious who the killer is. Plus the rhyme that she had to write and match up all the deaths with was just so cool. Spoilers coming after my next sentence. Despite being spoiled for who the killer was, I thought the ending was beyond creative. See, my sister had read it a year before me, and I remember her and one of her friends discussing this book as soon as they'd finished it, and in the back of my mind I was like, spoilers, but whatever, I'll forget it as soon as I have to read the book. So not a huge deal, and really I did forget who killed everyone by the time that I had to read it, but I did remember that the killer's name started with L, which left either Lombard or Lawrence Wargrave, so it left a little room for speculation. Thing is though, Wargrave had this whole speech toward the beginning along the lines of it couldn't have been this person because of this, and it couldn't have been this person because of this, and named every single person in the room, you know, after the first couple deaths, and said, well, it couldn't have been any of them. And so whoever he was talking to goes, well, who does that leave? And Wargrave says, well, I think I just made it pretty obvious. And he did. He named everyone, but he didn't name himself. Even after Wargrave died, though, I was sure it was him. I kept reminding myself that he was dead and that anyone else who died couldn't have possibly been by his hand, but I couldn't convince myself, and finally in the epilogue when it was explained that he faked his death, I was simultaneously relieved and disappointed that I'd guessed it. There's actually a play version of this book that a high school in my district did earlier this school year, and while the ending is slightly different, it translates really well. It was powerful enough to just have like a solid minute of complete darkness and complete silence, and the audience just kind of got more anxious and more like tense, like, oh my gosh, it was the coolest thing in the world. Definitely one of my dream shows to be in at some point in my life. Quality read. Once you get past the writing style, which is a little bit different, just like the way they do dialogue and things is kind of stiff and structured, but once you get past that, it's a fantastic book. I recommend to everyone. Freshman year we read a few books, and Lord of the Flies was one of them. I couldn't find the physical copy of this book, but I still want to talk about it. Basically, this book is about a few boys who get in a plane crash on another deserted island, and how they struggle to survive just based off of, you know, they try to be civilized, you know, they have this conch shell that they use to call meetings and things like that. The whole message is, you know, the difference between human and animal instincts, and when do they collide, and when do they change. Here's a spoilery story regarding my experience reading this book. So we read the book second semester, but on our first semester exam, we had to analyze a review of the book, of Lord of the Flies, and it wasn't as much a review as it was just like a summary, a detailed summary of everything that happened in the entire book. Yeah, and I just remember seeing it there and going, well, this is horrible, these spoilers, but I mean, it's an exam, I have to read it. So, I suffered through it, I answered all the questions, and, I figured, alright, I'll try to just forget that happened, but... So second semester comes, and we get the books, and, we're reading through it, nobody's really talking about it, but at some point it came up in conversation, like, just spoilers in general. I was like, well, yeah, on our first semester exam, I mean, everyone knows that Piggy dies now because it said on the exam that he falls off a cliff, and everyone just goes, what? He dies? Are you kidding? Sorry, I thought you knew. Didn't we take the same test? Oh, yeah, I kind of felt terrible. Anyhow, we had a ton of discussion questions about this, like, how would the story change if it was all girls instead of all boys, or a mixture, and at what point in the book did their actions go from humane to inhumane, things like that. And let me tell you, I had way too passionate of answers for all of these. Like, write a sentence or two responding? No, I'd turn in a page. I had heated debates with my classmates all the time about, like, what human nature is, and how these characters weren't really, like, aware that they were killing these other characters. It was so much fun, honestly. People call it a horror book, but really it's not that terrible in my opinion. It's easy to skim past, like, the violent slaughtering of a pig or something. Think of it this way. They were comfortable making 13, 14, 15-year-olds read it. Like, it could clearly be a lot worse. And then this year as a sophomore, we had to read 3 books first semester. First one was A Tale of Two Cities. Oh man, I hated this book. I would describe the plot here, but to be honest with you, I have no idea what it was. I think the reason I hated this book so much is because of Charles Dickens' writing style. It just wasn't my thing. He never said he frowned. It was the corners of his mouth turned down slightly and his eyebrows creased together in a 45-degree angle because of the way that he had felt about this thing that had happened, and he looked so displeased. No, he frowned. He frowned. Move on. There was a point where they spent literally 4 pages, just talking about how still someone was sitting. He was sitting still, I understand. Move on. Like, you can say he was sitting very still, incredibly still, remarkably still. You don't need 4 pages for that. I don't know if you were, like, paid by the word to write this book or what. I read, Lord of the Rings, and I read Great Gatsby. I'll get to that later. They use really intricate details about all these things, and I love descriptions, but there's a point. There's a point where it gets ridiculous and you just don't need it, and it's not helping move the plot forward. I remember writing, I didn't expect to include this in the video, I just thought about this just now, is that we had like some quiz over it or something, and we had to describe the book so far in 1 sentence, and I said, like, and I quote, Charles Dickens spends way too much time describing things and forgets he has a plot line to develop. Or something like that. It was something so sarcastic. I got those questions right, and really, Charles Dickens spends too much time harping on details and forgets he has a story to write was a correct answer for describe the plot so far. I don't even know how to feel about that. I don't know, maybe this is one of these books that I'll appreciate more as I get older, but for right now, I'm just not a fan. I was probably about a third the way through it, and I just threw it across the room with no intention to pick it back up. And I didn't, and I lost a lot of points. Second one we had to read was The Great Gatsby. This is a quality book right here. This book is about a man named Jay Gatsby, who is very rich and lives next door to our narrator, Nick. And Gatsby's essentially built his life around this girl that he met about 5 years ago. And there's this whole love pentagon because Daisy, the person that Gatsby wants to marry, is married to a man named Tom, who also has, a side mistress who's cheating on Daisy with, who is also married. love Pentagon. And honestly, although you're expecting me to say that my favorite aspect of this book was the characters, I really loved the artistic, poetic descriptions of things. For example, let's see, the silver pepper of the stars. This is a valley of ashes, a fantastic farm where ashes grow like wheat into ridges and hills and grotesque gardens, where ashes take the forms of houses and chimneys and rising smoke, and finally with the transcendent effort of men who move dimly and already crumbling through the powdery air. Stuff like that is throughout the entire book. It's just gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous wordings of things. How they describe the characters' voices, how the setting looks. It's absolutely beautiful. Not too predictable, not too slow. While hard to write essays on and answer questions about, I understand why it gets all the hype that it does. I always get nervous when books or food or movies or anything really gets a lot of hype, because then my expectations could be too high and then I'm disappointed by what it actually ends up being. But with this one I wasn't disappointed at all. Lastly, the most recent book I had to read, and easily my top 10 favorite books of all time, I give you Of Mice and Men. This book is about these two people named George and Lenny who are trying to get enough money to own their own ranch one day, but Lenny keeps messing things up or doing something wrong, and so they just have to keep moving along, but they end up on this farm, which is where this takes place. The story also had its poetic flair, but not as noticeably as Gatsby. Now, it's one thing to have a third-person narrator, but it's another thing to have the narrator not in any one character's mind, but just in the room with them. Usually you follow one character around, but in Of Mice and Men, you start in an empty room, you see the setting described, you watch the characters come in, watch them interact, and watch them leave again, and you're still in the room. Spoilers coming for this entire review. Storytime. I was spoiled that either George would kill Lenny or Lenny would kill George, but I didn't know which one it was. Despite telling people I knew what happened, I wasn't cleared up on who would kill who until I got there. That was such an emotional scene. I don't even know how to talk about it. I don't know where to begin. I even stopped annotating, I felt like it would ruin the moment. Seriously, one of my favorite books ever. I keep losing friends for saying that because everyone else hated it, but do your homework, everyone. Do better than I did on my Tale of Two Cities quizzes. And that's all I have to say. That's all I have to say for this video. Please leave a comment telling me some of the books that you've had to read for school and what you thought of them in the most spoiler-free way possible. I'll see if I can get around to reading those and then have a moment of silence for all the overanalyzing you probably had to do. Moment of silence right now for all the overanalyzing we had to do on really amazing books that just got ruined. Just like if you like this video, subscribe to see more similar ones. So long! 12 books that I had to read and for the most part annotate for school. Come on! It hasn't even started yet. I'm not allowed to fall down. Ugh. Now, I haven't seen the movie adaptation, and I don't plan to at all. Really does not look... oh man, don't get me started on that. I have not seen the movie adaptation. No, don't fall. This is the second time I've tried to film this, and why do I? This book is about a boy named Jonah who lives in this utopia where when I can't speech. I'm just describing a plot of a book. Why is this hard? I've been calling him Jonah. His name is Jonas. You can tell how much I remember this book. His name is Jonas, not Jonah. Oh no. I'm such a fake fan. I just know what book I'm going to pick up next. I just start laughing. I can't wait to rant about this one. Okay. Elie Wiesel was a victim of the Holocaust. He was put in the intern camps. He was put in... and... I rehearsed this. I know what this book is about, really. I just... yeah. There's so many bloopers, I'm gonna run out of recording space before this is over. And just how Miranda... I forgot the main character's name and had to read it off the back. Then, Another one where I just start laughing as soon as I realize that I'm about to go on an angry rant about it. Woo! And I was kidding when I said I was going to run out of space, but I have 4 minutes left. Are you joking? Hurry up, Cassidy. Gatsby. I really hope I don't need to retake that. At least I'll be prepared.